Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Carla Blumenthal. We're going to talk about the hidden obstacle keeping you from breaking through to your true freedom, fulfillment, and success. Welcome to Richer Soul, Life Beyond Money, the last baby step. Imagine it's 12 months from now. You've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? What's it like to have great relationships, friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money? To be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures. Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time. Your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. I help people live the life of their dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. You can learn how by listening to the framework in episodes 1 through 9. It's simpler than you can imagine. You can also hear actual coaching calls by looking under the coaching call tab on richersoul.com. You'll also find all the show notes for this episode there, and there's a link in this episode. I send out a monthly email, and you can sign up while you're there. In the monthly email, I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. I also share the most interesting articles I read on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. There are considerable tax changes for 2018. For me, taxes are my number one single expense, and I want to pay close attention to what is going on. For married couples, the standard deduction now goes to $24,000 a year. That means you need to have at least that much in deductions before anything you do matters on your tax return. Buying a house may no longer have much impact on your taxes, especially since there is now a $10,000 limit on tax deduction write-offs, and if you pay state income tax, that may already eat up a bunch of the limit, so you won't get much in deductions for the real estate taxes you have to pay. Write-offs for employee business expenses, investment fees, tax prep costs, alimony are all being eliminated or handled differently. Tax rates have also changed for personal and business income. If you've not already reviewed the changes and how they'll affect you, now is a good time to get ahead of the situation. This is a hidden area that money tends to disappear, and little effort goes a long way, especially for those of us in a higher tax bracket. I was just remembering the story of two kids fighting over an orange, and the mother, frustrated by the fighting, went to the standard way that we tend to handle these types of things. She had one kid cut the orange in half, and she let the other child pick which half they wanted. This way they don't argue over who got more. The one child then ate the orange and threw away the peel. The other child threw away the orange and used the peel for a project they were working on. Sometimes we just need to have better conversations about what the needs of the other person are, because when we understand the situation, both parties can benefit. Today, we'll learn more about how to have better outcomes in life and how to have better conversations. Today's guest is Carla Blumenthal, who helps high-achieving men to master their emotions so they can have better relationships and enjoy more fulfilling, successful lives through private coaching and programs. Let's meet Carla. Welcome to Richer Soul, Carla. It's great to have you join us today.
It's an honor to be here, Rocky. Thank you so much. I'm excited to dive in.
As am I. So, Let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I think growing up, everyone learns about money subconsciously, right? It's just ingrained in what they're doing day to day. Explicitly, I did not learn much about money through financial conversations or conversations in school or with my parents. There wasn't a lot of conversation about either financial well-being or just the state of affairs of money. I obviously learned because I picked up different clues either from my family or, just growing up middle class suburbs, what money meant. It wasn't until I became an adult, as I think most people realize, how ingrained their beliefs about money have been and what my beliefs have been. Growing up, we never had money challenges necessarily, but it was always that the belief system was, you go to school, you get a job, you get paid for the job, you come home and you invest. And that's about it. There was no real creative understanding of money or investing in yourself. As I got older, and especially I would say the past 2 years, I've done a lot of work on understanding what my assumptions and beliefs around money are and being very conscious about it. So I've worked actually with a money mindset coach. Her name is Emily Williams, and really done a deep dive into what my money beliefs were from my family and where, as an entrepreneur and a woman who wants to do big things in the world, what beliefs I need to perhaps release and where I can create a new money mindset.
That's pretty cool that you're actually spending the time and the efforts and getting a coach to work on those mindsets. I don't think a lot of people realize how much that can affect you and how much it can hold you back and how much that childhood mindset that kind of, as you said, it wasn't told to you, you just kind of absorbed it by watching, can make a bigger difference later in life.
Yes. And I've realized if I do want to grow, if I do want to live a life that's extraordinary and on my own terms, the biggest thing, as you said, that would hold me back would be myself and my belief system. And so taking the time to learn about what those belief systems are, especially when it comes to money, is actually, for me, the first step. Because otherwise I can't make the shifts if I don't have the awareness first.
And that's true with everything. Being aware of the issue is the first step to making a change and bringing it about. You have the awareness and now you're making changes, and that is cool. Yes.
What's really interesting about that process is stepping into the money mindset work is actually now, it actually very much relates to the work I do in terms of emotions, because money can be a very emotional subject for people. Being able to recognize where I held beliefs and also emotional responses to the subject of money has been really fascinating process to dive in deep there, and then also, serve my clients from there as well.
And that's interesting. And I've always said it. I said, the biggest obstacle we face is the reflection in the mirror, which is ourselves. And then the processes, if we can fix one part of our life, those processes and that success tends to carry over into other parts of our life. It sounds like you're a perfect example of someone who's going out and doing that, fixing yourself in one area, and it's crossing over into many other areas.
Yes. One of my mentors, Dr. Tracy Thomas, she always said to me, continues to, is that everything is connected. And so I really believe that when we change one area of our life and we bring awareness to one area, that actually cascades into so many others. And it actually makes the process of change easier then.
Across things, because once you experience one area, you can take those experiences and cross it. And that's very wise of her. I don't find that most people take a holistic view of life. I think too many people are living in silos, and I see too many companies are living in silos. Do you see the same thing, or do you see a lot of people looking at all the different connections?
I think if you are just starting out, especially in starting to explore yourself and explore what living an extraordinary life means to you, perhaps those patterns or connections haven't been totally created yet. I think that actually is a part of the personal development journey, is being able to perhaps, if you're working with a coach, see that pattern recognition happening, and for yourself, having the self-mastery later down the line to see where those patterns exist. Because within the patterns and the details is actually some of the awarenesses, like you mentioned, to change and grow. So yes, I think starting out, it's hard. It's really hard, especially if you're just yourself for the first time wanting to make a change, to see it in your current scenario. And so that's why I think it's so important to recognize that and also ask for help in whatever form feels good. Being able to know that perhaps, even though you may be super smart and intelligent in specific areas, there's always blind spots. And so being able to recognize that and ask for help is a key component, I think, of successful people.
That's one of the things that coaches do, is they point out the elephant in the room, the blind spots that you don't normally see in yourself. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's always helpful there. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you are on a journey to create an extraordinary life for yourself and continually improve. And I think that's how we came to meet, was at a High Performance Academy, which is Brendan Burchard's program, which was kind of an intensive 4-day event. I will say he runs it on schedule, unlike Tony Robbins. He's good about putting systems in place and making things happen.
It was an extraordinary event. Yeah, lots of learning, insights, connections, and being able to connect with you through a breakout session. It was jam-packed, which was a really fun experience.
It was. Was there one big takeaway that you left with?
Yes. I have pages and pages of notes, but as I look back and actually, not looking at that notebook, one of the biggest things was being able to choose your identity. So he has something called the interpretation ladder. More or less, it's the idea that when information comes in, we funnel it through our own previous experiences and our identity in that moment. At the end of the day, through that ladder, when information comes in, it goes through our current identity and it comes out through our current lens. And so if we can shift and make a conscious choice to shift what that identity is, then we might have a different output. So what was really fun is he gave us the opportunity to choose 3 words for what our identity would be moving forward. And so I'd love to share mine, and I'd love to hear yours, Rocky.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. We had us list out several different words, and mine were determined, radiant, and aligned. And I just felt that those words really, contributed to this feeling of grit and just connecting to my own inner joy and hopefully sharing that out with others. Those 3 words really resonated with me and have stayed with me since the event.
For me, one of them was freedom. The freedom to be able to make whatever choices I wanted. The other one was being intentional. So as I did things, I did them with purpose, not just randomly. And I think the last one was control. And it was control of myself, being able to control my emotions and so forth. And it's funny because just before we talked today, I just had a call with a coach of mine, and we talked about that word control. And he's like, you've got to let go of that word. And I think we kind of came to the thing that controlling your emotions isn't so much the thing as to have the flow in your emotions. So just being able to accept the situation for what it is and knowing the truth of what the situation really is. Because as you said, we look at everything through our particular lens. And I think that that flow is around looking at the situation through multiple lenses, from multiple different viewpoints, including the other person in the situation's viewpoint. that's probably what's happening a lot in this country is everyone's looking at from their point of view. No one's ever kind of stepping into the other person's point of view and understanding why they're doing what they're doing. So I think that word flow is a little bit better than the word control, because I can't control everything, but I can enjoy the flow.
It's a big shift, being able to have the control, like exactly what you said. We can't necessarily control either what's happening to us or even the emotions that come from within us, but being able to recognize them and in some way shift to master them in some way, or befriend them is an interesting word as well, versus having them, because control somewhat sounds like they shouldn't be there, versus befriending them and figuring out how to use them in a leveraged way.
Now that you mention that, it reminds me of something that Tony Robinson talked about. You know, we all have these thoughts that pop in our head, and the voices that, those emotional voices. He actually had someone come on stage, a big guy, and he said, you're going to be that voice that's constantly pulling me and telling me things. And then when someone's constantly pulling on you, you're pulling back, they pull harder. But what he did at one point was, instead of, when the person started pulling him across the stage, he took his hand and put it on his shoulder and started to dance with him. And so it's literally like getting in the flow, right? Dancing with that emotion, acknowledging it, not letting it pull you, but kind of going with it, and essentially, I guess, getting into the flow, which is not easy to do. We're too busy trying to pull and tug all the time.
It reminds me of something I spend quite a bit of time in coaching with, which is this idea of the higher level you and the lower level you. And this higher level you and lower level you are actually sometimes in a battle. So the higher level you is the part of you where your actions align with what you want, with those end goals. But the lower level you sometimes acts against your own best interest. So it's the self-sabotage part of you. Some people might say it's your adult self versus your child self. The child self might be having a tantrum or going and eating all the cake, or, you know, having some type of survival or defense mechanism, versus the higher level you being able to be a little bit more rational and making decisions that align with the person you want to become. The dance, because it's, you know, we have a choice to be in either, but we can't always be in our higher level you every moment of every day, every second, but we can try. And being able to have that dance and that flow of when we go into the lower level consciousness or actions, to recognize and say, oh, okay, I'm going to make a choice to go back to my higher level self. That's a flow and a choice as well to move back up.
What percent of time do you think people spend in one versus the other?
Oh, what an interesting question. It depends on your level of consciousness. I think if people are not aware of both of these parts of themselves, most likely they're in the lower levels, especially if they're facing challenges or in victim mode. But once they recognize that there are actually these parts of themselves and they have a choice, and building that strength to move from one to the other and that muscle memory, I'd say the percentage moves is higher, that they're more in their higher level self more of the time. But I know for me, I've been doing this work for many years, I still, a choice, I still dip down. And so it becomes, as many meditation teachers say, it's not that you're not thinking 100% of the time, it's the process of the return, the process of coming back to that higher level you. And truthfully, that's where all the outcomes of what we were talking about, living an extraordinary life, that's where those outcomes live. Because you aren't in eating random things you maybe shouldn't, or you aren't wasting time online or watching Netflix or doing a bunch of other different things that may feel good in the moment, but don't feel good long term.
You just hit health, you hit time, you hit mindsets, the relationship with ourselves. I mean, all of these are core values here, and they are all tied together. And it's interesting how, even from your perspective, you see it all come together. We're going to dig deeper into this. Before we do, though, I just want to kind of take a step back. Clearly, you've done a lot of work to get here. You said you had a mentor. I know you're part of a mastermind group, I think. Mm-hmm. And you've also had multiple coaches. Mm-hmm. How have all of these types of things helped you to create an extraordinary life?
A couple of years ago, I made a very conscious decision to prioritize learning and growth. From that, I realized that there were people out there that were living life the way that I could have only dreamt of. And so I said to myself that I obviously did not know the answer, and I was in my late 20s at the time. And so I said, if I really want to live that life where, as you said, I'm financially free, emotionally and spiritually and physically, I feel good in my body. If I want that whole suite of skills, then the opportunity is to learn them. We did not, growing up, have a lot of education in those skill sets. It was more traditional education. So in my 20s, made that commitment. I decided to find coaches and mentors and people that could help me grow. And that didn't just land on my lap, but I sought those people out and I made investments in myself that has really reaped dividends in multiple areas of my life. So it was that process of a choice, choosing to live that extraordinary life and work backwards to see who the people were that were already doing it, and also what the challenges I had in my life and who could help me see the challenges more clearly and help me overcome them.
So you were intentional in looking for a goal. You had the end in mind, what you wanted to live an extraordinary life, and then you just figure out the steps that get you there, and you put people on your team that help you to be able to achieve that goal even faster. Mm-hmm. That's pretty awesome.
Yes. And I think what's big here is that I really befriended vulnerability, because there's a moment there where I could say to myself, nope, like I can figure it out on my own, which in theory you could, but it's going to take longer. Or I could say, oh, I don't really have challenges. Or I could say it's not possible for me. That whole host of chatter. But I said to myself, if I see where I am now and where I want to be, there's that gap in between. And for me to move through that gap is going to take some vulnerability of saying, I have obstacles, I have challenges, and making myself vulnerable in speaking that out and seeking the resources to shift.
What concerns did you have that created that vulnerability? What was it that was kind of holding you back, or that holds people back?
Vulnerability, especially when it comes to our challenges or some of our weaknesses, depending on the person, but when we speak that out, it can make us feel like we're wrong, or that, we should have figured it out by now, or we should have been educated in that way, or there's lots of shoulds that come up, versus just being able to say, okay, this is where I am, and knowing that when you speak that out loud, that's actually taking you a step further versus a step behind.
Yeah, I think that is difficult to admit that we aren't right, or that we may not know something. Mm-hmm. And being able to accept that and want to move forward.
The more we can recognize where we're either making an assumption about something in our life, or where we're nervous to say something. When we're nervous to say something or admit something to ourselves, that's where we need to go and spend more time. And that's really the approach that I have in my life, is when I feel that, oh, I'm not sure about this, or I'm nervous to say that to this person, then I know, okay, that's my signal. Time to do it.
Just leap, right? I talk about leaping with a parachute, and a lot of times that's literally what you have to do. Just try not to do things that will cause you to crash and burn. Take small steps and continue forward. So you work with a lot of men, and I think you work on emotional mastery. What does emotional mastery mean?
From the highest level, it's the ability to recognize and understand your emotions so you can respond to the challenges in your life intelligently rather than reacting blindly. A lot of people respond based off of their emotions. They're sort of at the whim of what they're feeling in the moment. And oftentimes their feelings about a situation dictate how they move forward versus, like I mentioned earlier, stepping into that higher self, stepping into that adult self and making a decision from there. So in many ways, people are more reactive versus when you have emotional mastery, you are really coming from a responsive place from your higher self because you understand your emotions and you're not letting them self-sabotage you.
And I think a lot of people are very reactive. I know throughout life I've been very reactive, and I'm working to fix that. And it almost seems like our society is almost, I'm not going to say designed, but it encourages reactivity. When you watch the news and you look at what's going on, especially with politics and everything else, everything seems to want to drive you to be reactive and push you down to your lower self versus allowing people to come up to their higher self. And I don't know why that is.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I think over the past several years, especially as technology has been built out, there are mechanisms in place that can be addictive and can pull us away from the present and psychologically rewards reactivity. So I think there are a lot of things built into the system of technology and media that is rewarding that, as you said. And so really, I'm hopeful that over the next few years, we're going to see a turn that will change in the system itself so that it's less rewarding of the reactivity. But in the meantime, we have quite a bit of work to do to really be in that emotional and mental fitness state, because there's a lot of pulls away from us being connected to ourselves. And so that's the work there, is being able to have that internal state of connecting back in with ourselves as the primary versus connecting with the world as the primary.
And they've even admitted that they are designing the technology to do that, to make you reactive and to constantly come back and to be addicted to their whatever their software is that they want you to keep using, like Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it is. They're constantly pulling you back in. And so you have to be aware of that.
Yes. I have quite a few clients who work in technology. And so part of the process is really, in our coaching work, is looking at where people are distracting from themselves. Some people it's technology, but for others it's food. Others it's actually overworking. Some people it's relationships. So everyone has that. If they are operating out of their lower level tendency, that is going to be magnified, whatever it is for them. I'm sure anyone who's listening can say, oh, this might be my area. And so for everyone, it's up to have them recognize where that might be the case. And then really the process of moving from that distraction back to connecting back and truthfully learning more about yourself, is coming back to center, is important.
And so clearly the first step is just awareness. Where you're at now, what is it that causes that for you? Once we're aware, what's the next step?
This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because when we know what the process of change is, then we can actually assess ourselves and be much more in developing our own self-mastery. So I really see there's 4 steps. There's awareness, there's application of that awareness, there's integration, and then there's a new normal. And so I can walk you through each one of those steps. So we have awareness of, let's say we're distracted in some way. We figure out if we're distracted, we know we're in a lower level tendency. And so we can say, what would my higher self do right now? Then we're aware of the lower level activity and the higher level activity. We start to apply that awareness by choosing the higher level activity. And so this is where we're really just in practice mode. We're just applying that. That truthfully can be a minute by minute decision, second by second decision. Are you reaching for the cake? Nope, I'm going to, call a friend. Hang up on the phone. Are you reaching for the cake? It can be cyclical here. And so really applying that is an ongoing process. But over time, that gets integrated into who we are and our habits. The integration phase is really about solidifying that, having some type of potentially a reward system set up for yourself, some type of way to acknowledge and celebrate that you have integrated this type of habit. And then there's a new normal. Maybe you aren't reaching for the cake anymore, but at that new level, there's probably a new set of challenges. So the idea is that you may never complete this process. It's just always building on each other. Hopefully it does and continues, because that means you're growing. When you recognize that you haven't had new awareness or application, it might mean you're heading towards being stuck. So having all four of that, being aware of where you are on each one of in that path is a great way to be the master of yourself.
Very interesting. And just a word of caution on the rewards. So if you're going to the gym, the reward is not ice cream.
Sure.
Because they don't go together. And yet that's what people do. They go, oh, I worked out, I can eat more. And it's a major struggle. So you have to create the appropriate reward system for whatever it is that your goal is. What is the biggest struggle people face as they go through this?
I would say it's moving from application to integration. Because a lot of people get really excited when they have this awareness, and if they're really ready to change, they start applying that. And as time goes by, after a few times they've tried it out, they start to die down. Their motivation isn't there. Really, the process of moving from application to integration is, I think, where a lot of people get stuck. And so that's why it's so important to have a more holistic view of what you're really trying to do here. If we can always connect back to that idea of, I want to be longer term, more in my higher level self, more in my adult self, and knowing that is part of the goal, then knowing that that's where the outcomes are going to happen, then the idea of reaching for the cake or not becomes, there's a larger goal than did I have cake or not. There's a larger goal than did I reach for my phone or not. It's about that, but it's also about the larger context of truthfully being your best self. And that's the one example of how you're going to do that. So really being connected, as some people say, I know Simon Sinek is all about connecting to your why. For me, it's, yes, that's a part of it. But for me, the biggest view is, how can I be in my best self and be in my highest self? And one of the tactics will be not reaching for my phone, not going for that piece of chocolate. I know that is going to contribute to me feeling good.
And I think that's one of the biggest struggles people have is especially when it comes to spending money. If they walk into a store and they see stuff, it's the excitement of, oh, I want to buy that. More often than not, there's not the counterbalance, which is what you're talking about. The counterbalance to the choice. I want to be my higher self. I want to live an extraordinary life. By not doing this thing that feels good in the moment, I have the ability to have more later. But I think people because that's basically delayed gratification, and people really struggle with this one, I think. And so having the accountability partner is helpful, and maybe you've got some other thoughts.
Yeah, it reminds me of the marshmallow test. where, what was it, where kids, one group had the marshmallow, and they said they could eat it now, and the next group had the marshmallow and they got, I don't know, either another marshmallow or $1. Do you know the exact?
Yeah. So basically, It was little kids. It was like 4-year-old kids. You can find it on YouTube. Basically, what they said is, here's a marshmallow. You can eat it now, but if you wait 3 or 5 minutes, I'll give you another one, and you can have two. Some of the kids just couldn't wait, but there was a group of kids who could wait and ended up with two. Literally, that's how you build wealth. You wait so you can have two, which becomes 4, which becomes 8, which becomes 16, 32. And before you know it, compounding works and you become extraordinarily wealthy. But it's not going to work if you don't take the first step of waiting for the 1 to become 2 and the 2 to become 4. It's not easy, I think, for a lot of people.
It's where emotional mastery comes in, of really seeing that as a skill that makes emotions work for you, not against you, right? In that moment, the kid is so excited that there's a marshmallow in front of them. And so the emotion might be saying, go eat the marshmallow. It's right here. Someone's giving it to you. That logically can make sense. But if there's another impetus that, you can have two, there's actually some emotional mastery having to happen in that 3 or 4-year-old's, 5-year-old's kid's brain of, okay, well, I'm going to calm my excitement because you could say my higher self is telling me that I would like to have twice as much. So there's some emotional mastery 101 in that example.
That there is. I'm just, because, and you mentioned it earlier, we don't teach this to kids.
Mm-hmm.
And
or adults.
Well, or adults, yes. Well, if you don't teach it to kids, you're not going to teach it to adults. And I think that's changing. I think I'm seeing a lot more of this being discussed and these concepts becoming more and more mainstream and widely shared. But it's a shame, because if you can understand all these things and you can fix yourself at the core, everything else falls into place.
And I think this is what I've seen a lot of in my coaching practice as I work with incredible men, very high achieving men who are high in IQ and have just incredible success in their life, but they are feeling the repercussions of missing the EQ part of it, or the social side of it, or relationship side of it, which is completely natural because, as you said, we don't teach this. So how would you know? Yes, that we so much of our childhood, teen years, and even maybe the start of our 20s are about either IQ or education, and there's less about the emotional and mental and relationship side. And so what we do know, though, is that that side is what contributes greatly to your wealth creation, as you've noted, and to your overall satisfaction of life. And so it's completely natural to face that vulnerability within yourself and come to that realization, and then subsequently, ideally, you ask for help in some way. But that's what one of the main things I want to reiterate is that it's quite normative to feel that way because of the way society is set up and education is set up. And so the more we can focus in on this emotional and mental fitness, the outcomes are numerous.
When these people come to you, what are they experiencing that causes them to say, I need to bring about change? On a granular level, what are they seeing?
All of my clients are very successful. They are highly intelligent. So they're either, have top of their field in some way, and that might mean they are, a director or a VP, or are either, they could be a manager on their way up, or they are entrepreneurs or work in the tech world. as an entrepreneur. So there's a lot of different ways, at least on paper and resumes, that my clients, the way they look. But the common theme is that they have been successful and that the equation that have gotten them to where they are now is not working when it comes to satisfaction with their life, fulfillment, that feeling of connection. So there's a lot of feelings of potential like haze or numbness or just a lack of clarity or lack of motivation, which is quite shocking to many of my clients because they have always felt that. They've always felt that drive. So what I have noticed, as I said a few minutes ago, it's they have relied on the drive of their IQ and of their ambition, which has served them phenomenally throughout their whole life. And what they're feeling now is the struggle with perhaps not being as developed in the emotional side or the relationship side, or truthfully, what I just call is, being more connected to yourself and learning about yourself as a human. What I see is that the typical successful guy in this way is successful in a contained area, but that contained area may not translate into these other intelligences or to your emotional or mental fitness. So it may not even mean that it translates to the life outcomes that he wants. That's where I come in. I really fill that gap of cultivating emotional and mental fitness. The combination of his IQ and intelligence and ambition paired with that really creates the life outcomes that he wants.
As you said, they have the intelligence to create success, and yet they create that success, and then there's that pit in there that says something's missing. That's probably what causes it to come across. And I think, and for men especially, I think, because that's what we do to boys. Buck up, do it yourself, be a man, not ask for help, not create the things, not be emotional, just, kind of be that solid stoic figure. It's probably why they end up that way. They've been told to do it their whole life.
Yes. What's been surprising in my own journey when I became a coach, I just so happened that my first dozen of clients were all this particular client that I just shared with you. So I just followed that path because that's, it was a little surprising to me because I thought a lot of my clients, to be honest, might have been women. But seeing that there was a very particular area that I was feeling a need for relating to this emotional and relationship mastery was something that I felt very strongly about, that could really serve not only that guy, but his family and future successes.
We've kind of talked about it a little, but we really haven't dug more into the area of relationships and how this correlates with creating great relationships.
Yes. What's interesting here is that there's been a study by Harvard, I think it's called the Grant study, that was one of the longest running studies in the world about healthy and happy lives. Basically, during the Great Depression, the late 30s, they tracked 268 Harvard sophomores from that moment all the way, plus 80 years, to see what does leading a healthy and happy life, what contributes to that. What they found was that close relationships and the quality of those close relationships mattered more than money or fame in terms of what kept people happy and healthy throughout their life. This is such an incredible insight and lever here, because if you can look at that, they said it was one of the biggest revelations they had in this study. close relationships and the quality of those relationships are really what contribute to a happy and healthy life, we can ask ourselves, well, what contributes to a close relationship? And when you see what a close and high quality relationship is, whether it's, friends, community, your partner, we can see that it's two individuals caring for each other and being vulnerable and being sharing and doing things together, being active together. There's a lot of qualities that contribute to these relationships. But when it comes down to it, each of those individuals in the relationship, it's up to them to be able to learn about themselves, and also, to be honest, to be able to have the emotional mastery within themselves so they're not pushing people away, right? So when we are more clear within ourselves, when we recognize our emotions, when we can see where maybe our ego or lower level tendency is running the show versus our higher level self, we're more likely to have closer relationships. We're more likely to forgive. We're more likely to share something. That's an interesting nugget of saying, if we know that relationships are really important, what as an individual, who do I need to be to really cultivate that in my life? And I really think emotional mastery is a big part of that step to having those relationships, those quality relationships.
Very true. If you want to have great relationships, then you've got to make yourself the kind of person that people want to have relationships with. So it is doing that inner work to make yourself that type of person. People think, oh, if I have success and I have a lot of money, I'll have a lot of friends. And the reality is, those aren't friends in that situation. Those are leeches who want your money and your power. They don't necessarily want you as a person. And I think that's one of the struggles that comes with success, is trying to differentiate between those two types of people.
Yes. What's interesting there is, the study said it's about close relationships and the quality of those relationships. And so you can have someone who may be super successful, even famous, or, famous in a particular niche, and that person can still feel very alone. And so, exactly as you're saying, the idea of having people that you can really rely on and being a person that people can rely on too. That's a big part of it.
Very true. So we've covered a lot of different areas today. Is there anything I missed, or is there anything else that we should talk about?
One of the biggest insights I have from our conversation is just about being able to recognize when there is when you're facing a block within yourself, a challenge or an obstacle, seeing that we haven't been taught this emotional side of things. We haven't been taught a lot about the mental fitness and emotional fitness. And so it's quite natural to want to learn more and want to be able to grow in this area so you can have the outcomes you want in your life. That first step is probably the hardest step, is that recognition and the reaching out.
Now, when I tell people, sometimes it's a lot harder to go from 0 to 10 than from 10 to 100. It's getting started that's the hard part. Based on our conversation and what we've talked about, what is one action step people can take this week to move forward?
What's interesting here is we've talked about this lower level tendencies and these higher level tendencies. And I would encourage everyone listening to dive in and figure out, what are those lower level tendencies that you do that is actually pulling you away from the person you want to become. We've mentioned a couple. Might be spending too much time in technology, or even overworking, or spending too much time with a negative person, or particular food. Whatever that action is, starting to bring some awareness into what that is for you, and secretly how many times you're actually doing it. And not from a place of shame, but from a place of awareness, so you can start to make those shifts. So recognizing what that is for you and asking yourself, what's one thing I can do to shift that today? what's one way I can make step more into my higher self, my adult self from this action?
I think that's an awesome action step. And it doesn't matter where you are in this journey. We all have these things within us, and everyone's got them. Sometimes we don't even know because we're blind to it. It's just done unconsciously. I bet you people eat a whole bag of chips and don't even think twice about it because it's just, you sit down and you start and the next thing you know, they're gone. So take this week to find awareness and be aware of the things that you're doing. And ask yourself, is this taking me to where I want to go? If not, you're not going to change anything in a day or a week. But if at least you can find awareness and maybe ask yourself, is this what I really want? And how is this serving me? It's a great first step.
Yes.
If people want to learn more and find out about what you do, how can people find you and connect?
2 places. First is my website, carlablumenthal.com. There's information about who I am and what I do, and would love to hear from you if this was interesting for you or there was a moment of insight. Would love to hear what came up for you. And then second is I run a Facebook group called Emotional Mastery for High Achieving Men. And I post usually weekly in there, and there's a group of guys that are just on the path of personal development, path of self-mastery. So would love to have you in the group if this resonates with you.
That's awesome for sharing. I will put those links in the show notes, so make it easy for people to find you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think you brought about some excellent points, and if we can help people move from their lower self to their higher self, take that one little step, then they will get closer to living an extraordinary life.
It's been so much fun, Rocky. Thank you so much for having me on.
Have a great day. Is there an area of your life that you've been waiting to get started on? What small step can you take to get moving? What lower level tendencies are holding you back from taking that action? Isn't it amazing that financial or work success doesn't guarantee a happy life? We definitely need to overcome ourselves and work on connecting with others on an emotional level. I enjoyed the 4 days with Brendan Bouchard and looking forward to working through his course. He has some very actionable frameworks for living a high-performance life. Today's action step: what are my lower-level tendencies that prevent me from achieving my higher self? Awareness is the first step in making change. Is there someone you know who could benefit from what we talked about today? Please share, as it helps you to build social capital and create better relationships and start better conversations with the people you know, and they will appreciate you for it. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit. You can always reach me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I have shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.